Hello, today we are going to talk about the standard deadlift, form for the standard deadlift, where you should be feeling the standard deadlift and all things deadlift, a fantastic exercise that works the back side of your body. Let's start off with what the deadlift's working. The deadlift is going to be working your hamstrings along the back side of your legs, your booty muscles, your glutes. It's also going to be working your quads, your core, your back, and your shoulders. Pretty full body exercise. The targeted muscles, however, are going to be in your legs. So you're going to want to think about really strong glutes, hamstrings, and quads. That doesn't mean you get to forget about your core and your shoulders because they're also very important to this movement. So let's go over movement patterns for this exercise. Foot placement. You want your feet to be about hip distance apart for this exercise. You want to keep your shoulders pulled down and back through the entire movement. From the side, feet are hip distance apart, shoulders are rolled down and back, chest is big, spine is neutral, core is strong, and I do have just a little bit of a tuck going with my in my hips to really make sure that I'm activating through my core. Now, the movement from the side, you're going to keep your shoulders down and back, and I'm going to over-exaggerate this because over-exaggerating it really helped me as I was beginning with deadlifts to actually get the form super correct. I am going to pretend like I am pushing my hands back the entire time. Because with a deadlift, you want the weight to be against your legs the whole time. And as the weight gets heavier and heavier, that's a lot of work for your arms to be pushing that weight back into your legs the whole time. This is where your shoulders and your back get really involved in this movement. So the first thing that's gonna happen is that hip hinge. You get your hey booty on, right? You want your booty out there and you want it to be pushing out there. The further you can push your butt back, the better. I'm really driving my butt back as I hinge over, and I'm getting the bend right here in my hips, not in my back, in my hips. I'm keeping my chest big, my shoulders down and back, and that's really helping to ensure that my hips are what's pushing back in this movement. Let's go to the arms, right? So like I told you, I have my shoulders down and back, and I'm actively pushing my arms back as I'm hinging over. When the weight gets heavier and heavier, this is gonna come in handy because you've worked your lat muscles in a way that's allowing you to really control that weight and keep it right under your center of gravity, right? So I'm screwing my feet into the ground, I'm bending at my knees, hinging at my hips, keeping my hands pressed against my legs, pulling my shoulders down and back, keeping my core strong and engaged, and coming back up. Now I'm gonna do that in one smooth movement here. So hinge at the hips, knees are softening more and more as I'm getting lower and lower into this movement. My torso is ending up almost parallel with the floor at the bottom of the movement. My shoulders are pulled down and back, my arms are pushing back into this, and then I'm just going to squeeze back up out of it. At the bottom of this movement, your butt cheeks should be a little bit spread. And then as you close back, as you come back up, you're just slowly squeezing your glutes back closed. You want to avoid coming down and then squeezing them closed fast and popping your hips forward. You don't want to do that. You just want to think about standing tall at the top. Now, RDL versus deadlift. RDL is going to be a little bit more on the straight legged. Your legs are going to be a little straighter for an RDL, targeting your hamstrings stretch a little bit more and your hamstrings a little more. Range of motion is going to be less with the RDL because of that stretch in your hamstrings and the straighter legs. The deadlift, your legs are a bit more bent. So this gives you a little bit more range of motion, and it also gives you the ability to lift heavier with the deadlift than you would with the RDL because of those bent legs, you've got more range of motion, but also your quads are getting involved with this movement as well, right? So pushing my butt back, pushing my hands into my legs, keeping my chest big, softening my knees into a bend at the bottom. What you want to avoid that I see often is people think that an RDL is here, a deadlift is here. This is a squat. Just because your knees are bent more doesn't mean you get out of doing that hip hinge, right? You want to be getting that hip hinge with the knee bend. The hip hinge is the deadlift, right? That is the deadlift, right? So avoid this position. You want your butt up, chest down. All right, so let's get some weights into this movement. To pick up your weights, especially as they get heavy, you probably don't want to pick them up like you're going to be deadlifting them unless you have a barbell that's up off of the floor, right? You want to squat to get them. So you're going to come down into that squat position, pick your weights up, shoulders are down and back, feet are hip distance apart, and everything in my body is strong and engaged right now. Hinging at my hips, pushing my butt back, bending at my knees, not going past my range of motion. It's not a competition to touch your toes here with this movement. You just want to get to your range of motion and then squeeze your way back up out of it. From the side, if I was going past my range of motion, I would get to this point where I'm bending at my hips, and then finish it with that bend in my back. That's not doing anything for strengthening my back. In fact, it's probably going to end up hurting me, right? So there's no point in reaching lower than where your hips will allow. So my hips stop me right about there. They don't want me to go further than that, so I'm not going to go further than that. Bend in the knees, bend in the hips, everything's strong. Feeling this mainly in my hamstrings and glutes. My quads, however, are involved. My back and shoulders are involved. My core is very strong. And that, my friends, is your deadlift.